Hi, it's Brendan. I'm your technology concierge. And today I'm joined by John Owen, the CEO of Tiger TMS, and we're going to be talking about middleware. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Brendan. I'm delighted to be given the opportunity to join you and to talk about middleware and its importance for the hospitality industry. So the purpose of today's presentation is to describe what middleware is, and then show how it can help hotels move forward, give them more freedom of choice, and reduce their costs for providing the best possible guest services. First of all, let's start with a definition. And middleware essentially is exactly what it says. It's a software which acts as an agent between other applications, enabling them to communicate. Wikipedia's definition, as you see on the screen, I think is the best one. It says it's a software glue. It binds applications together, allowing them to talk easily to each other. So why do we need middleware? And to answer this question, I'll bring up an architectural slide of yesteryear from a very well-known hospitality group. And as you see, the PMS is centrally positioned in the architecture with all of the other applications directly connected to it. This was a successful proposition by all PMS companies since the advent of the new PMSs in the 70s. It was the most important application within the hotel, and all other applications should directly link into it. I don't deny that the PMS is the most important application in the hotel. However, I think nowadays, to enable choice and to reduce costs, then the PMS should be connected to other applications via middleware. So let's look at that in a little more detail. And as you see on the screen, the PMS in a traditional setup is directly connected to all other applications by interfaces, which I have marked with a red circle. Now, these interfaces are called APIs, Application Programming Interfaces. And normally, PMS manufacturers charge for each of these interfaces individually, and they command not only a purchase price, but an annual support price. So in the standard sort of hotel situation, the more applications you have connected to your PMS, the costlier it is. And the other factor to take into consideration is that PMS companies, whilst being very good at developing their own PMSs, aren't so good at developing interfaces to third-party applications, especially if those third-party applications are new to the market or specific to your particular property and you want to integrate them very quickly. It can take many months for the PMS manufacturer to develop that interface to allow you to use and to connect that application to the PMS. I was once speaking to the largest hotel group in the world at a large hospitality exhibition, and they told me it takes about 18 months for their PMS supplier to develop application interfaces for them. So if you take that into consideration, this is quite a restrictive architecture. It ties the hotelier into the PMS and makes the hotelier very dependent on the PMS supplier to offer any additional connectivity requirements. Okay, so I mentioned in the previous slide APIs. What is an API? And for this, I'll use the example which is provided by MuleSoft Corporation. Very easy to understand. This is what an API does. And essentially, an API is like a waiter. A waiter will take a an order from a table and take that order to the kitchen. The kitchen will then satisfy the order, and the waiter will take the food back to the table. This is exactly what an API is. Basically, an API is taking information from one application to another, and the answer is then provided back to the originating application. In terms of APIs, a little detail here on the evolution of APIs. We've come a long way from serial connectivity, and the two most popular API types prevalent in the world at the moment are the SOAP API, nothing to do with the cleanliness of the API itself, and the REST API. SOAP is used largely in enterprises and also across hospitality, but has been slowly replaced by REST APIs because REST APIs are easier to write and use smaller messaging formats than SOAP. But those are the two key API types if you ever come across them. A lot has also been talked about in the industry about open APIs, and Muse were the first PMS company to introduce an open API. What this means is that Muse publish their own standard for interfacing, and third-party companies can write to that standard to connect whatever application they have to the Muse PMS, be that a TV system, a telephone system, internet, or whatever. They are all written to the same API standard. This is an excellent sort of move forward from on an API front, but remember the API itself that Muse publishes is still a proprietary API. It's not common to any other PMS. It is just for connecting into the Muse PMS. But this approach is different from the other approach, which is taken by Oracle, whereby they actually publish an API per function. So an API needs to be written for each of the particular applications that you want to connect into the Opera PMS. And as you see on the screen there's a whole list of them. Our company, Tiger TMS, has currently certified interfaces for TV, PBX, and Internet for the Opera PMS. Now, this tends to sort of confirm and to reinforce the PMS-centric view of the world, which has been around since the late 70s, whereby every single application you connect into the Opera PMS needs its own interface type. So why do we need middleware? And the easiest way to just to describe middleware, as I said at the start, it's software glue. In other words, it's a translation service. Basically, there's a PMS with an interface on one side and the application you want to connect on the other. And what the middleware does is comes between the two, speaks the language of the PMS on the left and speaks the language of the application on the right. And middleware essentially translates the message from the PMS into something which is understandable by the application, and vice versa when the communication comes back the other way. So middleware essentially is a translation service between the PMS and an application, or between applications themselves. There's not the necessity to have a PMS communication. This is an example of a middleware scenario using the Tiger TMS iLink. We have an interface between the Otrim TV system and PMS systems, whatever they happen to be. And this basically allows this functionality, which is listed, to be provided on the TV in the room, such as check-in name and displaying messages, viewing bills, etc., and things like that. So this is a real-life example of how middleware connects between a particular TV application and a generic PMS. Middleware is not singly point-to-point between one application and the PMS. It can provide multiple interfaces at once. So this is where middleware scales. PMS now only one connection into the middleware, but talking to many applications at the same time, which leads us to the new diagram, moving away from the PMS being at the center and the hub and spoke architectures of the past. The PMS is connected to all of the applications, but there's only one interface into the PMS. This saves money in terms of the number of interfaces supported and paid for to the PMS company, but each application is connected to it. And it's now easy to add or remove applications because you are writing the interface to the middleware, you're not writing the interface to the PMS. And middleware companies are specialists in doing this and can provide new interfaces for new applications within a matter of weeks rather than months and years that perhaps it took in the past. Middleware is also interesting when it comes to dual flag properties. A number of the large groups are now having two types of property, two types of hotel within the same property. Maybe sort of an upper tier brand and a middle tier brand sharing the same property. Each will have their own PMS. Middleware essentially allows them to share resources between the two different hotels, thereby saving money on all of those other applications that you are going to need. So to summarize the benefits, middleware provides freedom of choice for hoteliers, doesn't constrain them to the limited choices available by the PMS. It definitely sort of reduces operating costs. There are no more sort of costly interfaces to maintain. Only one interface into the PMS. Much, much quicker deployment, so you can introduce new applications speedily and according to the demands of your customers. It's an agile and flexible architecture, and undoubtedly, at the end of the day, by bringing in a middleware-centric architecture, you can deliver improved guest service. Thank you very much for your attention. Goodbye.
Thank you, John. That was fantastic. Really, really appreciate that.